Hey 4th grade, Miss Rowe and Pebble here. It's a beautiful day, so we're outside getting ready to start on week 5 of learning. This video is going to be a read aloud of the text for week 5, and it will be here as a resource as we continue to work through the text this week and write in response to text. Let's get started. Okay, here we are on page 5 of our week 5 packet. We are going to go ahead and get started with our first read. Thinking in the back of our minds about our text focusing question, what are the 3 types of rocks and how are they formed? So this text is a new chapter of the text that we read in week 4 from the book Geology, the Study of Rocks. As a reminder with this text, we're going to read it in columns, which means we'll read on this column from the top of the page to the bottom and then move on to our next column. This text also has lots of text features, including great visuals and captions, so we'll take a moment to pause and make sure that we are comprehending our text features as well. Let's get started. Chapter 4, The Rock Cycle. The Earth is constantly changing. Major events such as volcanoes and earthquakes and even erosion may seem random. Before we move on, let's stop and take a look at this text feature more closely. A closer look at this first key visual, we see a caption here. The rock cycle shows how rocks are constantly changing. So this is a different visual of how we can imagine the rock cycle showing how rocks change from one type to another. So as we read this chapter, we'll get a better understanding of these processes, but this visual is helpful to get an idea of where these different pieces of vocabulary fit together. So we start with melting and magma. Then we move up to volcanic activity. Next, erosion. Then transport or movement, following our cycle to deposition. Next, metamorphism. And we notice how the cycle goes back to erosion or to melting and magma. Ready to move on to our second column of text on page 5 of our packet, starting here. These changes are all part of a pattern, however. This pattern is called the rock cycle. Rocks and minerals are created, destroyed, and renewed. Some events in the cycle occur over millions of years. Other events, such as volcanic eruptions, occur quickly. Geologists divide the rock cycle into 3 basic stages. Each stage creates a certain kind of rock: igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic. The stages can be happening at the same time at different places on the Earth. Turning to our caption, James Hutton introduced the idea of the rock cycle more than 200 years ago. We're going to start with this first column on our text feature caption. Magma that reaches the Earth's surface is called lava. Magma cools quickly when it reaches the Earth's surface. Igneous rocks. One stage in the rock cycle creates igneous rocks. Igneous rocks begin as magma. In certain locations deep inside the Earth, temperature and pressure are just right to melt rock into magma. Some magma travels to the surface through volcanoes. After escaping the volcano, the magma cools very quickly. Now we'll move to the top of this column here. Some magma rises toward the Earth's surface but cannot escape the crust. This magma cools and hardens anyway. Because it is not exposed to the cool air at the Earth's surface, the process takes thousands of years. Magma might harden quickly or slowly. Either way, hardened magma becomes solid igneous rock. We're turning to our caption here. Most igneous rock forms underground, but some forms on the surface. Now let's take a look at this second visual. Extrusive igneous rock. Magma comes out as lava and cools on the surface. Or intrusive igneous rock. Magma cools off beneath the surface. And we see these helpful labels here: Earth's surface and magma. Let's begin at the top of this column on page 7. Settling into sedimentary rock. As plates collide, some rocks are pushed up into mountains. At the same time, erosion wears down those mountains. Erosion also wears down volcanoes and igneous rocks. Wind and rain carry the soil and rock particles away. They are deposited into valleys, onto lake beds, and on the ocean floor. This caption: limestone and sandstone are 2 examples of sedimentary rock. And here, patterns of lines often develop in sedimentary rocks. Now let's move to this column, looking at this caption for the visual. Erosion sometimes carves rocks into interesting shapes. When eroded pieces of rock are moved to a low spot in the earth or ocean, they begin to pile up. This process is called deposition. Dead plants and animals might also pile up with the soil and rock particles. This layer of materials is called sediment. As more and more materials pile on, the weight presses the lower layers of sediment into solid rock. The solid material created in this stage is called sedimentary rock. Turning to our first column on page 8, we see another visual here of our rock cycle. Taking a closer look at this visual, we can see that this is another graphic representation of the rock cycle. So again, we start with magma. Following our cycle up, we see magma flows to surface, cools to form extrusive igneous rocks. Next, we see weathering and erosion, transport, sedimentation, compaction, and cementation form sedimentary rocks. Metamorphic rock forms from heat and pressure. So we see there are 2 options. 1, we can return to magma. Next, magma cools between surface to form intrusive igneous rocks, followed by uplift to rejoin the rest of the rock cycle. Turning to the body of our text on page 8, we'll begin reading here with our first caption. Metamorphic rocks are often extremely hard. Metamorphic rocks under pressure. As the sedimentary layers build up, the deepest ones come under intense pressure and heat. This can also happen to igneous rocks located deep beneath the Earth's crust. The pressure and heat change the chemical makeup of these rocks. Their minerals are forced to change, or morph, into other kinds of minerals. As they change in this stage, they turn into metamorphic rocks. Heat and pressure can also change one kind of metamorphic rock into another. Moving on to our second column. The rock cycle continues. Rocks caught between 2 colliding plates can sometimes be slowly pressed downward. As they move closer to the mantle, they experience more of the mantle's intense heat. They may also be involved in chemical reactions that occur only at plate boundaries. The heat and chemical reactions melt the rocks into magma. The magma collects, and some of it travels to the Earth's surface. It cools and hardens into igneous rock, beginning the cycle again. Here our caption says, the word igneous comes from the Latin word for fire. And here, the rock cycle ensures that the Earth's surface will continue to change for as long as the planet exists. So there is our first read of this chapter of our text. This will be here for you as a resource as we investigate this text further and write in response to text.